Imagine the year is 2027. Now, if you're listening or watching as we're releasing this, that means it's 5 years from now. And imagine that Kevin Ezell and I could look into the future, that we had a little taste of omniscience. We don't, but that we could look into the future and we could say, okay, what do churches look like 5 years from now? Then imagine that we could see those pastors of those churches and we're able to say, what's happened in these past 5 years among these churches, among these pastors, among these leaders that have caused them to be so healthy? Well, I'm Thom Rainer. I'm joined by Kevin Ezell, the president of the North American Mission Board, and we're going to look at that for 3 episodes in a row. And we're going to talk about you being the best church leader you can in 2027. So I get confused sometimes when I see that, and we're going to talk about all the issues. This one, part 1, is about the culture in which you're located and where we are right now. I just got back, Kevin, from doing another conference. I was speaking to it was a national group, but it's headquartered out of Las Vegas. And I was speaking to them just a few minutes before I came onto this podcast. And they were asking cultural questions, because one guy from New York City had a cultural question, another one from Las Vegas did, and another one from Texas. And they ended up finding out that there were a lot of similarities in the culture, even though they didn't think there were. Mm-hmm. So we're going to talk about the cultural issue. And the first thing that we want to bring up on this, you got to learn to lead in this new culture. That's the whole topic about this particular podcast. Used to, we would call it a post-Christian culture. I think we're one step deeper into it. I think we're in a post-cultural Christian world. And what I mean by that is there were a lot of people who attended Highview Baptist Church when I was interim pastor, and then Kevin became the pastor, that might not have been Christians. I mean, I'm just going to guess that there might have been some people at your church who are not Christians. And here's what we're finding out. A lot of people used to attend church because it was the cultural thing to do. It helped your business. It would help your reputation in the neighborhood. It helped you in politics. And so you became a part of the church because it was the cultural acceptable thing to do. Now, what we're finding is very few people think that it's necessary. People in the United States think it's necessary to be in a church or even to be a Christian to be accepted. So that's why I call it a post-cultural Christian world. And I know that was a monologue, and I'm not supposed to do a monologue. We're supposed to have 2 people here. Kevin, this whole idea that North Americans no longer feel like they have to be a Christian or they have to be a part of a church. How much is that reality of what you're seeing with the North American Mission Board?
Oh, absolute reality. I think it may even be further than that. Where you saw years ago, it was an advantage. Now it's almost not neutral. It's almost a disadvantage. And they try to disguise it in such a way, not that they're ashamed of the gospel, but they don't lead with that by any means. And so I think the way America has kind of segregated itself through political views and all those different things and what people have tried to make Christians out to be, I think that they hold it. I hate to say camouflage it, but they do not lead with it. It's not an advantage at all, and they just try to keep it from being a disadvantage.
So, what I'm hearing you say now is that being called a Christian or even being connected to a church these days may actually have some friction because they think it's a disadvantage instead of the opposite of just an advantage.
I think what they could do is they could go back and get some videos from an international mission board 5 years ago on how to relate when you go to another country and apply it to where they live now.
Oh, that's good.
It really is the condition. I'm going to California here in a few days. I mean, we have to buy properties and rent properties through another name other than the North American Mission Board, so that we have access to properties in certain parts of Utah, and it's a different day. But again, we try to neutralize it, make it not a disadvantage. But we've got to think more missionally and teach our people to think like true mission. We always want them to be evangelistic. They do need to be that, but they have got to think missionally and how to connect with people.
You're bringing up such a good point because for most of my upbringing, being called to be a missionary meant usually international, that you had to step outside your own boundaries.
Mhm.
Being called to be a missionary today, probably more than ever, means you step outside your front door and
Right.
there's your mission field.
No, absolutely. I mean, I just finished talking to a planner in D.C. and what they went through in Easter and having outdoor. I mean, it's just the cultural challenges are constant, and people are much more aggressive on things they don't agree with. It's you can't have casual conversations about things anymore. People are passionate one way or the other, and there seems to be less and less middle ground. And they kind of loop us all into one big group, and make us all like the guy with the wig behind the basket saying Jesus loves you, and which is, it's
I
not
thought you were going to do the John 3:16 one because I remember him at
that
all the ball games.
same guy, different poster. Yeah.
Haven't seen him for a while. He probably didn't get to come in with that poster anymore.
Yeah.
So we're talking the issue of what the culture is like, and my point is it's a post-cultural Christian world, and Kevin's point is well taken. It may be culturally negative to be a part of a church or to be called a Christian. So that's part of the culture. So leaders are learning to live in that culture. What this means is church leaders, number two, have got to make their neighborhood or their community their focus. I mean, you've got to learn to love where you are and learn who the people are.
Right. I think part of it is the pastor's got to train his people. Look, we got to set a culture here, and it's to reach people. We don't compromise the gospel, but we've got to reach this culture. And so I hear churches say, well, everybody at our church wears a suit, or everybody at our church does this. And it's because they're focused on their church culture, and they're not making that big of an impact on the community, if any at all. I mean, it's just all pretend, because they haven't baptized anybody perhaps for years, and they just aren't setting a culture for people to even want to connect. And and so I think the pastor has to set that culture and help his people understand. Look, it's out there. That's a difference in the Church of Antioch. They focused on the people outward, and the Church of Jerusalem, they focused on the inward, and it has its own set of problems.
Or the church at Corinth that had focused inwardly with all the negative stuff they had.
Well, I didn't know we were going PG-13, but yeah. If you go, I was staying purely G with Antioch and Jerusalem.
Yeah, yeah. Corinth does become at least PG-13 on that. So, Kevin, my team's been involved in a consultation, several of them going on right now. And in one of them, our team demonstrated to the church that if you continue your attrition rate, in
Mm,
other words, if you continue to lose the number of people that you're losing, purely mathematical formula, in 7 years, you will be exactly at zero. The
mm,
numbers worked out perfectly. Not even a -2, it'd be exactly zero. So we recommended some changes to them. One of the responses of one of the key leaders was, "No, our people will never do that." And I just said, "Well, you're not going to have our people to do anything shortly." I'm telling them they're going to die, not because I'm prophetic, because I don't want to get stoned if I'm wrong. It's because I can do math. They're going to die.
and we found that people don't make legitimate change sometimes until they can't pay the light bill. Then they're like
Yes.
open to some suggestions. But it's crazy. I've seen people just go down for the count, and some of them would almost wear that as a badge of honor. We'll be, if I'm the last one standing. Like, how sad when you could, you know, pass the baton to the next generation. Actually, and I've told this I think before, where we've had churches, we've had some people agree to move to the basement and let someone else plant a church upstairs in their facility, so they can actually reach the community, but they just did not want to be a part of it. They wanted to have a classroom in the basement, and it's
Wow.
sad on one end, but I'm really thankful that they're at least open to letting somebody use their facility to reach their community.
Well, that may be a new form of consultation for me, Kevin. Your church is going to die. Who can we bring in real quickly
Yeah,
as you die?
yeah. And, well, at least I think they do need to have some of these churches. Who am I to tell you how to consult? I mean, you've been doing it for decades, but they need to have an estate plan. Hey, who are you leaving this stuff to? Because you're going to be gone. You're just one bad car accident away from this church being gone. I
Yes.
mean, and they don't have plans, and that's why they end up as lofts or, some denomination scoops them up, and I mean, we've got a whole group of people who are constantly looking for facilities right now of churches that are near uh, closing.
And you mentioned this particularly in some areas of North America, United States, that some areas it's almost impossible to find a church facility. Is that generally true in a lot of areas, though, that it's be getting more difficult?
It is, but I'm amazed at the generosity. There's a church in Massachusetts that's a congregational church, not the same denomination that I am, and they just gave an $8 million facility to a church plant, gave it to them,
Wow.
because they wanted to see people reached, and knew that he was doing that, and I mean, it's just incredible. I mean, you're talking about open handed, realizing the situation and lateraling it, and um, we're thinking 5 years ahead, and it's a really good, serious question that a lot of churches need to ask, because if they wait 5 years from now, it's way too late. You can't
And
really turn something.
that's really, you nailed it. That's the point of this three-part series. If you wait 5 years from now to make some of the decisions you need to make, you will not have the opportunity to do so.
Yeah, it's like I'm going to do a will, but I'm going to wait till I die to do it. you know, I mean, how ridiculous. You know.
Well, just as a kind of humorous note, my wife Nellie Joe is she does not believe that any of our sons should be treated unequally. And
Right.
so every time I give something to one son, she said, "Well, you got to send the other sons out. You got to do this or that." I
Mm.
mean, I said, I didn't raise them to be socialists. Can't we just,
Yeah.
let them have different things? So, first around, we're doing our will, and so we need one to be an executor, and so we made one the executor. And she said, well, all the other boys need some responsibility. I can't remember, but one of them got the honor of deciding that they'll pull the plug on me if I
Yeah.
if it's time for Dad to go, he'll have the honor of pulling the plug. She ended up not wanting that to happen, not because she didn't care if I died or not, but because she wanted every boy. So she went into co-executors because they've all got to be treated equally. I can wait to see that happen.
Now
I
they
won't
get to
be
be
around.
mad at each other when they do it, right?
Yes. I think it was Jess who said, "Oh, I get to pull the plug," and I think it was Art who said, "I wanted that role," and so we ended up giving them all the same roles. Anyway, back. I'm getting off topic here, but we're talking about making decisions now because 5 years will be here before you know it. What do
Hmm.
you need to do to be the best church leader in 2027? You've got to know the culture. Here's another thing about the culture. You've led this as a pastor even before you went to the North American Mission Board. It's what I call horizontal growth. And it's basically vertical growth is everything you put into the Sunday morning time slots. And then, but at one campus, horizontal growth is other campuses, other time slots. It's moving beyond the traditional. You were doing that as a pastor, and you're seeing more and more of that today.
Oh yeah, and I encourage every church to think. It's not about growing a church as much about reaching a city, and let
Mm-hmm.
your decisions be made about how can you reach your city instead of how can you grow a specific church at a specific location. And that's what we found. Even churches realize, look, they can do it better over there than we can do it here. So let's just do that. And we were like, say, at the time we were in Louisville, Kentucky, we were wanting to minister on campus. How can we get more of those college students to come to our church? Well, we're only 25, 30 minutes away. I mean, they're college students. You just want them to get up on Sunday morning. And so, what if we took it to them, and did it on campus? Well, there's a thought. And then we end up with several hundred. I mean, it's crazy. But you got to think different than getting people to come into one location.
That's a classic horizontal growth. Was that University of Louisville?
Yeah, yeah, I'm a Kentucky fan, but
I was,
ministry,
that's
missions,
that's why I asked the question. It'd be like me starting a campus at Auburn.
Yeah, I spoke out there a couple of times, but it was really hard because I had to hold my nose the whole time. Just kidding. I'm just kidding.
You're talking to the chairperson of the Rick Pitino fan club of many years ago. Even though he was at both of them, even though he was
Yeah.
at both of them. Here's a reality that most people don't realize. Anger toward the churches, anger toward Christians, as Kevin has pointed out, is greater. But pure receptivity to the gospel, people willing to to at least engage in a conversation about it, has not changed. Our research is showing that that has not changed. I mean, 15 years ago, you may be talking to someone in Birmingham, Alabama, and they would be just as likely to have a conversation with you about the gospel as talking to someone in Spokane today. We, I go to Matthew 9 a good bit, Kevin. We use it as a benediction in our church, and it's a passage that I know you're familiar with, where it says, "When he saw the crowds, he had compassion upon them, because they were confused and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. He said to his disciples, 'The harvest is great, but the workers are few.' So
Mhm.
pray to the Lord who's in charge of the harvest, ask him to send more workers into the field." We can't have the excuse that there's no one out there that'll be reached. That's my bottom
No,
line there.
no, absolutely. People are far more interested in hearing the gospel than we are in sharing it.
Oh,
And
that is a classic quote. Is that
so,
is that a typical Kevin quote? Because I've never heard that come from
no,
you.
I say it, but I mean, somebody said it. I'm sure. I didn't think of it. I'm sure, but it's one of those things where so many people have said it. Give credit to none, but it really is the case. I was just on a flight just last week to Columbus, Ohio. I didn't even take off on the airplane. I already knew the guy had 4 kids, one son that's rebellious, and he went through all. I mean, we ain't taken off yet, and I wasn't asking necessarily. He just jumped into it, and so people are more open to share about themselves. I'm not saying everybody, but people are very open to talking about, and they're not intimidated by talking about religious things. Where we think that meant Baptist, Methodist, Episcopal.
Yeah.
Now it could be a plethora of things. But
Yes. Yes. Uh, Recently did a set of videos to do a lot of them, and the videographer brought a makeup person. I don't know why, because it didn't. You can't help me. It's just, yeah. But she put the makeup on, and
she forgot
as
the
she
bag.
yes, just put a bag and put holes in it. So as she was putting the makeup on, I guess I was maybe 2 to 3 minutes. I found out she was a Mormon. I found
Mhm.
out she was going through a divorce. I mean, I could just go down this as she's putting makeup on me, and I'm not even able to talk at this point. And
Yeah,
before she left, I gave her a book about Mormonism that she wanted to read. I'm
yeah.
thinking,
Hey, you remember you launched something called Faith years ago, and
actually, it preceded my reign there, but thanks
did
anyway.
it?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I always gave you credit for it. I apologize. But one of the key words on there was, "Hey, in your personal opinion, what does it take for a person to go to heaven?" I had a guy sit down with me, and we started talking about the Bible and different things. He goes, "Well, hey, in your personal opinion, what do you think it takes for a person to go to heaven?" I mean, he asked me the question and didn't even know he wasn't a believer. It was crazy.
Oh wow, he asked the
Yeah,
faith question.
yeah. It was
So I talked to my community group, equivalent of a Sunday school class, whatever, at church, and I asked them, what they used to how they what they used is, if they have a tool to share the gospel. You don't have to, of course, but do you have a tool? And their silence told me, probably nothing, because they didn't tell me what their tools were. And I shared with them 3 circles.
yeah,
I mean, I actually got the Life on Mission app out, and I went through it with them, and they loved it, Kevin.
yeah.
So thank you, Nam. Thank you, Jimmy Scroggin. Thank you, Kevin Ezel. They absolutely love that app, and they were all downloading it
Not
right
an
then and
easier,
there.
not an easier method. It's really easy.
It's perfect for introverts. You don't have to say a thing. You can just press the button and tell them to read.
Yeah, yeah. So
I loved it. I loved it. So thank you for that tool. And I know that I use that tool in a book that's coming up. So thank you for permission for letting us put it in there, because I think it's one of the best ones out there. We're talking about culture, but the whole theme of this podcast is looking 5 years into the future. What do you need to be doing now? How can you be the best church leader in 2022 when we are recording this, in anticipation of 5 years from now, 2027? We're talking about you got to learn to lead in the culture. We've been going over several points on this, but the last point here is not that just you need to understand the culture very well, you need to make sure your core team, whether that is a staff, deacons, elders, what are just influential people, you need to get them on board. And it basically comes back to Cracker Barrelology that was invented by Kevin Ezell. And that's bringing in people and just talking to them so they can be aligned with you on this issue, Kevin.
Right. And well, they can own it. Ideally, you want them to own it so they end up being the ones that sell it instead of one guy pinging around the church trying to get people to create a culture. And so you're exactly right. You have to have a sense of ownership. And for people to think, they're used to thinking 3 to 5 years ahead on just about everything. I mean, we're talking about wills and trust and different stuff. I mean, we all have to think ahead. And the church should be no different. But sadly, it often lulls behind and doesn't. And so that's all we're saying is, look, Pastor, please give it some thought on not just surviving the week, but trying to project out where you think God would have you be in 3 to 5 years.
I hope you're enjoying this first part of the 3-part series, How You Can Be the Best Church Leader in 2027. And part one has been learning to your culture, the new culture that you're in, learning to live in it. When we come back for the next podcast in this part 2, we're going to talk about the basics. And Kevin and I have alluded to it, but the basics have not changed. We're going to do a review of that. And then by the time we get to part 3, we're going to be talking about the biggest basic of all, the priority of evangelism. So thank you for being here for Revitalize and Replant. Hey, let me mention this before we go. The NAM Replant Summit, North American Mission Board Replant Summit in 2022 is coming up. Look at the link in the show notes. Click onto that. Amy has already made it available for us, and love to have you there and love you to be a part of it. So it's always a good event. So get ready to be there. All right. Thank you for being here. Make sure you come back as we look at part 2 of what it means to be the best leader in 2027. And Kevin and I are going to start talking about the basics, and you'll see they really haven't changed. We'll see you in the next episode.